Hello and welcome to the Profitable Coach Podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Rich, and as the founder of the Bold Life Movement and a fellow coach for more than 7 years, I know the challenges that many of you face when launching or growing your coaching business. And I'm here to pull back the curtain on the coaching industry and help you overcome roadblocks to make the impact you were born to make. Each week, I'll be interviewing successful coaches from every corner of the industry to share exactly how they have managed to generate massive impact and income. From strategy to psychology, we cover it all. This show is presented to you by Transformation Academy, a global marketplace of courses and coaching certifications. So whether you are already part of our epic community or you're brand new to this show, if you're ready to learn what it takes to turn your passion for service into a profitable business, then keep listening. You are in the right place. Hello, friends and fellow coaches. Today, I've got a super inspiring guest with me, Miss Shoshanna Raven of the Living Brave podcast. Shoshana is a holistic lifestyle, business, and leadership coach who primarily works with female entrepreneurs and heart-led visionaries. As a so-called shame slayer, Shoshana speaks openly about taboo topics like sex, money, and power. And she's a woman after my own heart, as her message and mission speak directly to some of the things that I chat about on my other podcast, The Bold Life Movement. What began as a one-woman show with no intention to monetize grew organically to a multi-million-dollar-a-year business in just 2 years. Shoshana has now worked with thousands of clients all over the world, hosted sold-out global retreats, and runs a team of rock stars. She's on a mission to slay shame, tell the truth, and unlock your limitless potential through brave leadership, learning to walk with fear and stay open to the magical mystery of this wild human experience. One of the reasons that I invited Shoshana onto today's show is because she truly walks the walk. So without further ado, please welcome the one and only Shoshanna Raven. Hello. Welcome back to the Profitable Coach Podcast. I have with me today the one and only Shoshanna Raven. How are you, dear?
So happy to be here. I've really been looking forward to this. I feel so honored to have a chat today and meet your wonderful community.
I love it. So Shoshana and I first connected because she is actually dating one of my dearest friends. And it was such a beautiful opportunity for me to get exposed to someone who's in the same industry as me, but has been doing it differently, has been doing it in a way that is so true to her and so aligned. And I found that to be both incredibly inspiring and also super triggering. And I think I told Shoshana that on our second meeting. And so I'm really grateful to have her here today because I think she can offer up a different perspective on how to do coaching and do the business side of it. So for people who aren't familiar with your backstory, Shoshana, do you want to give us take us back to Living Brave and the birth of this beautiful business?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that it takes so much bravery. I mean, my brand is called Living Brave. And so bravery is all about just getting all of the fear and the shame just out of the darkness and being able to walk with the doubts and the fears and the blocks. It's you can have money blocks and still make money. You can be really scared and still be successful. How do we live as humans who have all of the experiences, all the doubts, all the fears, we're all the same, and then go create what was previously felt was impossible to us and just keep expanding our capacity, right? So our ability to be I felt this really uncomfortable feeling and just naming it just gets it out of this darkness. It's not oh my God, there's something wrong with me. Oh my God, I feel triggered. It's oh my God, I felt really activated. There was some kind of pattern that was operating and I just want to get it out of the darkness so that it no longer has power over me. And then I can heal it and alchemize it and say, whoa, I'm feeling something here. Let me, instead of avoid, approach. And that's really what Living Brave is all about, being approach oriented. I always tell my clients, I hope your greatest fears come into fruition so you find out who you are in the process. And people don't want to hear that. When it's that's freedom. It's holy shit, my whole life I've been even subconsciously dimming my light and people pleasing and staying in this box and trying to define myself in an Instagram bio and trying to put 5 million disclaimers on things. And it's like, people still don't get you. Your biggest fears happen. You have your knees on the earth moments where you've lost everything and your vision completely changes and you're still there and you realize, oh my gosh, like I get to rewrite every single story I've ever had about myself. And I also get to pick up the pen and decide that even in the hardest moments, that this is the middle of the best chapter of my book. And that's really what happened to me through, Living Brave started really as a passion project. I think it's so important for entrepreneurs to do things that are just for the sake of doing them. And you and I were talking, like, sometimes we do a lot of things for the sake of doing them and we avoid the like, and I get to be abundantly compensated for this. But for a lot of people who get really into like just the outcomes and the milestones, like to actually just live and be fulfilled, there's a frequency that people can feel no matter how woo you are when you're really living in alignment with like your truth and you're doing the things and sharing the things that make you feel energized, like podcasts. When you're talking about something that energizes you, you leave a podcast and you're like, I'll do another one, And like sometimes you're really tired after a long day, a long run, but it's like that good kind of tired, doing that thing. And that it might take a while, but it's often like something that like, oh, what if I did that? What if I did that? Like that feels like it'd be really fun. So for me, that was coaching for the longest time. And the word coach kind of had this like, who do you think you are to be a coach? I was already coaching basically like my whole life. I loved talking to people about their dreams. I remember every guy that I dated ended up like quitting his job, quitting law school, going to South America, it's like, okay, basically hang out with me for long enough and you'll quit your job and go to South America. And so I just loved to do that. I loved human psychology and I just kind of like shoved it down. I did the freelancing thing and I love sharing my heart on social media. And I really was sharing and writing for the sake of it. I had a blog called The Loopy Scoop, which is so funny how like nothing changes and everything changes. Like Christian, my partner that I met you through, his first blog was called Rethink Reality. And we were looking at some of our blog posts, The Loopy Scoop and Rethink Reality, and we're like, holy shit, his is like, we're all gonna die, and like very much Christian, and mine is like, embrace your emotions and like joy is medicine. It's just
Can I tell you what mine was? It was called Gypsy or Genius. And it was like about leaving the 9-to-5 world and moving overseas. And I was like, Gypsy or kind of a genius. Like that was the whole angle. And I feel like we probably had kind of similar like flavors.
Absolutely. Oh my God, we got to talk more about our beginning blog days. It's just so fun, to share.
So fun.
This is really the essence of it. Like the thing that when you do it, it really makes you feel like the freedom of self-expression. Like the most liberating thing that you can do is like speak your truth and speak your story, but in a way that's so empowering. And so I had broken out of the 9-to-5. I had been freelancing, traveling the world, and I was sharing inspirational things on Instagram, but my following's 1,000 people I had met, friends and family. And I was in Nepal. And I was working at this kids center where I was working with untouchable caste children, which was already a really like emotional experience. I would do my freelance blogging, then I would go work at the kids center. I would go to this guest house, this French guest house, sleep on this really thin mattress, like all these travelers, you know how it is.
Oh yeah.
And I got really sick. Like 104 fever, nerve pain down my legs, really interesting symptoms. And as a traveler, you're like, okay, let me go buy $1 antibiotics down the street. But it was getting really bad. The antibiotics weren't working. And I ended up going to the local hospital, which I remember taking photos. Like it's not like it is here, and I was kind of scared, but I was like trying to view my experience from an outside lens. Like, sometimes we document our experiences to pull ourselves out of it so we can observe. And the doctor was like, you have typhoid. I'm like, I have a typhoid shot. Like he's like, well, what do you think you have? And he wouldn't like look at me and communicate with me. He was speaking to the guest house owner. And I was trying to explain to him some of the women's health issues that were happening with me. And he just said like, women sometimes just get stressed. And in that moment, I like shrieked, I screamed. Like I was just like so defeated. And I got back to the guest house and I went online. Something happened where I just realized like, oh, I have one of my biggest fears. I have a highly stigmatized STI. I know it. And I just Googled it and I found all of these pain-filled, shame-filled anonymous forums about HSV, which is herpes. There's HSV 1 and 2. 2 and 3 people have HSV 1. Most people are asymptomatic for both.
Yeah.
1 in 4 New Yorkers has HSV 2, often shows up as genital herpes. And so for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I have all this conditional confidence I had about me, this surface level spirituality, like you're more than your mind and your body. And like, I am not Shoshana, I'm the unborn, undying self, like bypassing the deep experience, which all of that's amazing. But like, there's a deep, deep human experience.
Yeah.
Like
we came here for it.
Right. Like, what do I really believe about myself? And it was such an ego death. Like, I didn't call it that at the time, but it really felt like my life is over. Like, I'm 25, my life is over. 24, 25. I had a good run. Like, I remember looking at photos of myself, seeing a different person. Like, this was me before, and now, like, look, I didn't, life is teaching me a lesson, like I have had to learn this, and like I had a good run, and something bad was bound to happen. Kind of brought this onto myself, and it just crushed me. I was about to go trek the Annapurna circuit, and I was like traveling 2-year solo travel, and just like, I felt like a little girl again, I'm crying. I'm on the phone with my mom, like, oh my God, my life is over. I have to buy this ticket and go home. And there's this really hot guy at the hostel that everyone's swooning over. I'm at dinner, and I can barely keep my head up because I have like the fever that comes first and the reverse outbreak. And I'm like in line for the bathroom the next day. And he walks up to me, of course, and he's like, hey, where are you? You're going home? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sick. He's like, oh, it's the pollution, I bet. And I'm like, yep, the pollution. I go back in my room, like, I'm just like, I'm never going to be able to have romance, like a fling again. Like, I'm broken, I'm dirty, I'm broken now. And I hear this knock on my door. And I open the door, and it's the French man. And he's like, I forgot to ask your name. I'm like, Shoshana. He's like, oh my God, Shoshana. That's so beautiful. And I'm like, oh my God. I felt like such a victim. Like, I just felt like, gosh, this horrible thing happened to me. And just long story short, I ended up flying back to the States. I moved to Denver, which was already my plan. And I found myself in some of the same habits that I was in before I quit my job, moved, left New York, went to India on a one-way ticket, stopped drinking, like found spirituality, was writing all over Elephant Journal. Like, I am never going back. I'm never having a rock bottom again. And I found myself in a fucking rock bottom, feeling like a shell of myself, feeling like I had no boundaries, feeling like everyone I was surrounding myself with, it was like I was setting the bar real low. So I felt, better about myself. And I'm just going out all the time, abusing drugs and alcohol again. I was like, wow. And I heard a voice one night. I was crying myself to sleep at some party. I think I took LSD at. Like, it was that kind of, I don't even know. I was going out probably 6 out of 7 days a week. And I was just avoiding. But this time it was like so out of alignment because I was teaching yoga, and then I was writing, and I was writing for Investopedia and all these different blogs. And I just heard this voice that said, you can keep doing this, and you can keep seeking outside of yourself and numbing and avoiding, or you know exactly what to do. Like, become your own best friend again. And that night I woke up the next day, I stopped drinking. I started treating my body so well. I started prepping for a half marathon. Someone asked me, do you want to run a half marathon? I'm like, yep. She didn't even end up doing it, but I'm not even a runner. I'm like, I started running. I was going to yoga. I cut out. And this is where, when we talk about the quantum leap, and I know Christian has told you about the Ben Hardy book, 10X is easier than 2X. He's
really on that book right now.
Yeah. The whole concept is like, think about the times that your life has just radically changed. Like that quantum leap energy, you usually let go of like 80%, not only of what you're doing, but who you're being, like the people, the thoughts, the beliefs, the patterns, like everything. And so I just radically changed my life. everything I was doing, everything I was thinking, who I was hanging out with. And I really got back to myself. And that was another soul journey, this time not taking a one-way ticket to India, but I traveled across the US by myself. I'd never pitched my own tent. I was going to yoga music festivals by myself, volunteering. I was on the Blisswear team in the middle of Oregon at Beloved Festival with like, it's just crazy. Like in the middle of the forest with no cell service, no Wi-Fi for a whole week, like feeling like, honestly, during that period of my life, which is also the vulnerability project, so I'll share a little bit more about that, I was the happiest I had ever been. I realized that I not only had to come home to myself, but I had to face the thing I was avoiding, because often we avoid when there's deep stuff that we don't want to look at. And so what was that? Well, the avoidance was blocking me from the shame and blocking me from the pain and blocking me from this thing that I was hiding in secrecy, but it was also blocking me from joy and the like self-expression and the bliss that comes from embracing and loving your whole self. And so it was more of a numbed out existence. So you say yes to life, you say yes to everything. And that's when I decided to practice telling people the scariest thing about me. I just had this intuition. It was like, oh my God, every time I knew I had to heal my story and heal myself through vulnerability. I was just like, I kind of found out by accident, because I would start talking about my story and crying and snot would go everywhere because I felt like, oh, this horrible thing happened to me. And, after about 20 minutes, a person would say, yeah, me too. I've had HSV for 20 years. And I'm like, oh God, okay, wait. Oh. And someone else would say, oh, well, let me tell you about this horrible thing that happened to me. And I'm like, I started to, not even through my own, like, I've got to change my story, but I was like forced to change my story because I realized I'm not a victim. And in fact, everyone has something they're hiding. In fact, this is a boring, mundane fact about my sexual health. So it might have nothing to do with HSV and everything to do with the things I already feared about myself that now just have something to grab onto. And I started saying, what if I just decided that this was a part of my story that I'm just really fucking passionate about breaking shame and stigma. Because the more that I open up to people, I say, this is something that's a part of my story. And I thought my life was over. But actually, the more I open up to it, the more freeing it is and liberating it feels. And people open up to me and it's like, I feel connection like I've never felt before, and it feels freeing, and there's a vulnerability high. Then the more people started to say, holy shit, like, that's badass. Like, that's really badass. I'd start making jokes. People would be like, yeah, you want a sip of this? I'd be like, yeah, I have herpes though. Hopefully, like, I have herpes, but don't worry, you won't get it. Cause, and they're like, what's happening? I just started opening up and opening up and opening up. And I decided to tell all of the guys that I had dated and had a crush on and made out with at a festival and everything over the past like 3 years about HSV, because I just knew I wanted to share my story. I didn't know I wanted it to be like on Women's Health magazine. And I probably sent like 10 crazy messages to the moth, like, please pick me. No one ever got back to me. I was just like, I know that I need to share my story and I need to tell the people I'm most afraid to tell. It's not that I had been dishonest with them and slept with these people. It was like, I just wanted to practice, like, telling the people that I thought were going to see me as less than, and these people who I thought only saw me as like a girl they might date in this object. That's my story, about myself as a woman. And on that journey, I mean, my previous partner, who we were together for 3 years, I reconnected with him during the vulnerability project. We had gone on like 2 dates. We had fallen out of contact. And I was like, hey, I'm like doing something really brave. And we tried to meet up in person. Anyone I could meet in person, I did. And to my surprise, people were trying to make out with me as I'm telling them I have genital herpes. My whole freaking world was flipped upside down. I'm like, holy shit, you are the only one limiting yourself. This is insane. But we connected. He was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Can I help you build your website? And then we actually saw each other for who we were, which was like, you're really cool. You're really cool. We're friends. And like, oh, I think we're falling in love. It was so insane. It was so wild that it really sparked my podcast, which I had no intention of monetizing. I had old dreams of being a coach, but I never thought that was going to happen. It was really just, oh my gosh, I'm shaking on the way to record this podcast. It feels like years in the making. Like, I'm going to explode if I don't share this with the world. That's the life force behind Living Brave. And it's so much that goes into the making of it when we think like, oh, 0 to 5 million in 3 years. Like, that's so crazy. But you think about like the personal journey that happened before. You think about Oh my gosh.
I thought I heard thunder, but I wasn't sure. Now I'm sure.
So amazing outside. Anyway, it's just such a passion project. And I think like I know that my passion is helping people fall back in love with really the art of self expression. And I work with a lot of creatives, right? Like business is very different from an artistic business. Like
Yes.
people who their heart and their soul and their story is really connected to their work. And they really like part of it is that they love to create for the sake of creating. They're really invested in people's transformation. And for that, there's a staleness, I think, that's been in the business world that can kill people's spark. It can kind of kill the magic, and it can also kill innovation, because it's great when you find a formula that works and you find certain strategies that work. But the whole point is that the art can be baked into the business. Like, hey, let's try this strategy. Let's try this. Let's do this. It makes no sense. Let's do this. It feels fun and creative. And often those are the things that have worked the best for me, is like, this makes no sense. There's no strategy attached to it, but it feels fun. It feels alive. Let's go. Let's evolve. Let's grow. And people are
I
happy
think
to be on the journey.
for sure. I mean, even just hearing you talk about it now, I'm like, freaking sign me up, because I think that that element of the way you were running your business was so like infuriating for me when we first met, because I had been working with Christian for so long and being in different kinds of masterminds with him, and he's quite successful, but in a very masculine, formulaic, strategic way. And so trying to fit my like feminine, creative, flowy personality into these like perfectly curated, funneled boxes, it was hard. And so it's really nourishing for me and inspiring to see that there is another way, and to see that you're so passionate about this other way of working.
Yeah, that's so it's so fun. When you think about most of the world, I think about my sister's boyfriend's grandmother, who has passed, but she's incredible and she's so sassy. But my sister Kayla would always say that she'd always go, made by a man, like something's like probably made by a man, but like, there's so many things when you look at business, you're like, that's made by a man.
Yes.
Like the way that business has been run, it's like they're traditionally like businessmen and selling to men, and the way that men buy and sell. And it might be controversial, maybe, I don't know, who's listening, but the men and women are like very different, very different. The emotions that I go through every single day compared to Christian, it's like his face is like, and I'm just like crying one second, and then I'm hysteric the next second, and then I'm like contemplating the meaning of life the next second. He's like, oh, it's like so cool. Well, in a polarized relationship, it's like that's what brings us together, right?
Totally.
Like it's so beautiful for you to feel in all of your feminine and emotions without story, right? To be able to shapeshift like children do. It's like not making anything mean something. Like, I'm crying today. It's amazing. I'm going to turn on a sad movie and just let myself feel
Be
the
with it.
sadness, like I feel disappointed. I'm going to let myself do that. I'm going to move through my emotions. And we just are such creative, multifaceted, multidimensional beings. And so are men, right? And I have male clients in my spaces, but it's really interesting to think about feminine business and the art of fulfillment versus the art of success tied to metrics. And often when we focus on the art of fulfillment and aliveness and expression and evolution and creativity, the success is a byproduct, and that can infuriate people, because you're basically like, yeah, fuck the rules. And it's like, it becomes easier, and it's just like, damn it, I've been following all the rules, and it's like, well, you can play, you can have fun. And it's been really fun to just look at the art of living and the art of business through the lens of energetics and emotions and heart and soul. And I like to call it like feminine business, the way built for women, based on the way women buy and sell. And you think about, when I've told Christian that one of my mentors had 3,000 people in a over $100 mystery offer, like mystery, no details at all. He was like, excuse me? And I'm like, like if you had a mentor that you really loved and trusted, and they were like, hey, I have this amazing offer, I'm giving you no details just so you can play with like mystery and surprise, we love this as women.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you do it? He's like, I don't, it was him and another guy. And they're like, I don't think so. I'm like, yep, We are, yeah, there are. We are.
That's why he doesn't buy, what is that makeup box that was super popular like 10 years ago where you don't know what you're getting, but you get one box every month.
Yes, I forget the
Birchbox?
Birchbox.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so there's like these are fun strategies, cool things that we can play with, playing with energetics, playing on emotion and heart, and speaking to potential and speaking to power and showing people what's possible rather than what I
Yeah.
feel can really squash people is feeling like, oh, I have to now position myself as an expert, which means that I need to be perfect, which means that I
Mm-hmm.
need to be teaching all the time, which means I need to be performing all the time, which means that I need to be fitting into this box. And what I find is that like if when you're embodied, the embodiment and the just showing and the speaking and the reflection is like, wow, people just feel your embodiment. And then when they
Yeah.
see that you're also a human, that's the bridge. It's like, wow, you've created this thing and we're the same. Shit. Now you don't have to speak to my pain and you don't have to speak to my
Yeah.
struggle because I can no longer take my excuses as excuses because I see that I can do it too. So let's grow together. And
Yeah.
that's been the
I love
focus.
that. One thing I wanted to ask about, you mentioned the moods fluctuating day to day. And I know that you have inside your club like a daily message of inspiration or wisdom. How do you provide that daily, knowing that day to day you might feel different?
Yeah, well, my perspective is that everything in life is a lesson. And I had this mantra when I was going through a breakup couple years ago. Like, I live a meaningful and magical life because I decide to. And so it's a
Mm.
way of romanticizing your life where in every moment you're like, okay, if this was a movie, what would happen next? Like you're just like, oh, and you're looking at how you can curate your life, even the smallest moment, like I just ordered the shower cap on Amazon and I was like, this is so fun. I'm gonna wear this around the house, like this is like it's a little thing sometimes. But like really, how can I, even if I'm like, I feel tired today and I feel like I don't want to show up to this, there's a lesson in that. There's a meaning in that. Like
Mm.
a way of looking at life where you see like an infinite possibility in the moment, where there's always something like, I swear I've had to apologize to my clients in some of my programs lately because we're watching these documentaries and I'm like, there's so many metaphors and there's so many things from this documentary, like so much I'm learning just from Netflix. You don't have to go
Yeah.
anywhere crazy, but I think that I always say it's my responsibility to be inspired. So if I'm
Mm.
often not inspired in my business, probably because I'm not inspired in my life. So am I doing things that inspire me? Like I can go to my teacher Jordan Smiley's class down in Denver and just get so inspired by something he says, or plug into a training, or go on a walk and be in nature, just like live my life and wake up and really say like, okay, I'm open to a message that
Mm.
wants to come through for me, for my community today. And there's always something. I would say that playing with the energy of devotion, um, and really showing my community the consistency that I've built over time. Like I would never tell anybody to do anything like the club, actually. That would never be what I would consult on. Like ever. It's like, I'm going to show up every single day and give a training every single day. Um, that's really for me and my energy type and what I am like creating out of the club and my goals. And I want to show to myself and to my community, like, yeah, I've committed to you guys. And
Mm-hmm.
I always ask, like, how easy can I make this? So I'm showing
Yeah.
them like how easy. Like yesterday I was on the way home from dinner with a friend and had my music blasting and I was screaming and I was like, I'm going to scream into the club. Like my daily training was 1 minute and 30 seconds of me screaming. And I'm so happy. I'm so excited. And I'm like, it's all about breaking free. And it's just a prompt for them to scream and yell and
Mm.
express themselves into the chat. So it's not always like a 40-minute training on how to announce an
Yeah.
offer on a live stream or something. Like I've done really like tactical trainings. I've done behind the scenes trainings. But sometimes it'll just be like I'm musing from the day, or it'll literally be like, this is what I'm feeling right now. And here's a challenge for you to engage in this, like,
Yeah.
and be an active participant. So I always ask, how easy can I make it?
I would love for you to speak to that more because I remember you saying that when we met, and I had, months and months of a 90-minute webinar just sitting on the dusty shelves. And I was like, what does she mean by this? How easy can I?
Yes.
So speak to like what that means for you on like a practical term so people can take that and like go run with it.
Yes. Yes. I love this is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I call it the chill rocket ship. This is something that one of my clients once on one of my mastermind calls, we were doing like a half of the year celebration party, and she said, like, I feel like we're just on this chill rocket ship. And I'm like, that's something. And she's like, I think that's something. And it ended up being a program that I did, but it's really like, oh my God, it's raining so much. It's crazy. I love when it rains this much, when you're like so passionate,
when you're excited. I know. Yeah. I was like, the weather's playing right now with us, talking about energy and frequency.
How easy can I make this? So this is really about, for me, this is the art of like feminine embodiment, the art of like consciously creating your reality. So we talked about romanticizing your life, which is like in every moment saying, what would happen next? How can I find the meaning in the magic? How can I find the beauty in this moment? Waking up like a little kid. Like I ask Christian every morning. I got inspired by something my little sister used to do as a kid. She'd say, hey, Dad. Say, yeah. Let's have the best day of our lives. And I just love that energy. It's like, she's literally like, today could be the best day of my life. And we just don't often get in that state. So Christian and I ask each other every morning, like, are you ready? You know, for what? For the best day of our lives, or for the best Monday of your life? You know, and that's, you know, not every single day are you able to tap into that, but as much as possible, tapping into that. The other energetic I really work with is, okay, instead of pushing on the gas and like going full force and being like, I'm just going to bang this out, and then having to be like, okay, being in my feminine means shutting off the computer, putting on a bubble bath, and not talking to anyone for 3 weeks. Is there like a third way, which is that people are literally puzzled by how calm I can be. You know, someone like that, where it's like, life is happening all around them. It's like raining on their wedding day or whatever it is, whatever your worst nightmare is. And they're just like, yeah, no, I feel like this could be even more fun. And you're like, yeah, excuse me. And that person, you're like, I just want to have what you're having, because you are not allowing anything to rob your joy. Where the world, it's almost like if you're not bothered, then you don't care. It's almost like we try to prove to people that I'm taking this seriously because I'm upset. And it's like, you don't have to prove to anybody that you're stressed. Like, it's an emotionally addictive pattern that we get into, the stress and that whole response or the seriousness. And I feel like that playfulness of like, you know what? Nothing can bother us. My dad calls it NCBU. It's something him and his friend used to do when they were working in retail. Nothing can bother us. Like, nothing can rob my joy. Nothing can rob my happiness. Like, if this is happening, why would I make this worse for myself? And that's the chill rocket ship energy, is like, how relaxed can I be? Like, if I could make this as easy as possible, what would need to happen? What's actually important here? And I find that for me, I just have an idea for a program. And sometimes when we're creatives, right, when we have ideas, when you're like, oh, I have this content idea, we're like, okay, but I could put it in this carousel and I could, you know, send it off to an editor. And I have a program idea. Now I need 5 weeks for the sales page. And now I need to create this funnel. And by the time you're about to launch it, you're like, I don't even feel connected to this thing anymore. So, oh my God, story of my life. Right? I just asked, like, all right, how easy can I make this? Well, I need a platform to tell people about this. I need a way for people to pay me. And then I need a place for people to gather. And it was like Zoom, payment link, social media, you know, and that's it. I remember in the beginning, like, oh my God, my body would get like physically hot. And this is a thing I have had to overcome, which is why I'm so grateful for Christian helping me say, you know, I am capable of structure. I'm capable of some of the more tactical things. I'm so capable. But like, I remember being like, what is this website thing? Landing page, email sequence. I've never had an email sequence. I've never had like a traditional funnel. I don't have a sales team. We didn't have sales pages for so long. Like, I just said, how freaking simple can we make this? Because if I thought about it, a lot of people who I wanted to work with, it wasn't because of their like perfectly manicured Kajabi thing. And it wasn't because of like their super high quality edited footage. In fact, like, people often like the behind the scenes the most. And if I got into a program and it was like, okay, like that was 5 20-minute modules of like fluff and it looked beautiful, but it doesn't make me want to continue with this person, double down on my investment. It was really like the quality of the work itself, how it makes me feel, the strength of the community, the potency of the work, the connection that I feel with my audience. And I actually found that less was more. Like a lot of the times I'll take down my sales, like any kind of sales page. So I'm like, honestly, I feel like this is getting women in their head. They're like, yeah, I want this. They click on it and then they start reading and they're like, oh, I don't really know if I need that. And they leave. So I'm like, for the longest time, I didn't really get what was so complicated in business. I'm like, just share your heart, share your soul, share the way like life, what's happening in your life right now. Like, what do you know to be true? How do you help your clients? You know, your daily musings, like people care. And if they don't, they'll just leave. And then when you have something of value that you feel excited about and you position it in a way that puts it in a ballpark of its own, it's like, wow, I've come up with this life coaching method where we first dive deep into shame and help you unlock and heal your shame. And then we rewrite your story. We do that through some empowerment work, you know, and then we really work on taking action, helping you take a leap. That was like my first program. And this is the Living Brave coaching offering, you know, and I do 3 months and 6 months. And if you're interested, respond to the story with a fire emoji. And then I got like, you know, people from high school. And I'm like, hi. I'm like, holy shit, I'm scared. I feel like an imposter. This woman that like was really cool and a year older than me from high school, like wants to do life coaching with me. And she's like, yeah, I really liked what you said on your stories about how you set goals. It wasn't when I was selling, it was just sharing value. And like, that really resonated with me. And I've been really wanting to work with someone. I've been working with a therapist, but I'm looking for something different, more like, you know, results driven or future focused and a different perspective and someone who's able to tell me really what they think I should do. And I'm like, okay. So I started working with people. I didn't have all the modules. I didn't have slides. I didn't have, you know, like I used to do. And I'm not against any particular tactic. It's always the energy behind it, right? Where like I did a sales call with her or, you know, my first clients and maybe I had a sales page for it, but it was really like, okay, how do I get people together, offer value, give a strong and clear invitation, you know, like sales, like make it fun, make it flirty, like make it exciting. I've recently been making some really fun offers to people I've been doing some custom work with. And I'm like, do I have the opportunity to like flirt with you for a second? They're like, absolutely. I'm like, okay, great. Wait for this. And, you know, like for me, that's like the way sales is supposed to be, right? Like I have something exciting and I just want you to know, like it goes without saying that I'm really honor wherever you're at. And I'm excited to like invite you into this thing. And here's exactly in the best case scenario, how I foresee it playing out and changing your life. I'm totally devoted to this. And I think that kind of way of heart-centered business that was based on storytelling and real connection, community, and like heart-centered sales and more of a sales ecosystem rather than like a funnel. Just like, oh, people come to my class and then they follow me and then they join the community here and then they join this thing and less of like conversion rates. And I didn't even know what an opt-in rate was like a month ago. You know, I've still don't really I think that means people that go to the page and then sign up, you know, but like I've never tracked any of that. And I think it really helps. It really, really helps with staying in what actually matters and keeping your energy super clean, because that is the foundation of everything. Like really wanting to serve people and really focusing on your skills and quality of the work and the community that you're building. And it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And I think sometimes it's easy to see like even my business and be like, oh, it's just been a rocket ship. But there have totally been, there have been like so many hard things, like so many brutal things, so many moments where it looked like this is the end, or, you know, your mind makes up crazy stories.
Yeah, totally.
It's not making anything mean anything. And actually being in a line of work that you care about so much that you're like, you know what, I would be like, maybe you don't have to say I would be doing this whether or not I got paid, but like, I say that all the time. It reminds me like, okay, I'm not available for anything that's supposed to be for me and for others' benefit to rob me of my joy. This is supposed to make me happy. This is supposed to be life-giving. I grow, people grow, I get better, they get better. It's something that like, I'm just going to keep doing no matter what. And I'm just going to weather all of the storms. And that I think is really ultimately what differentiates people who perceive that they fail just because they kind of like pulled out early. Like my first launch being a $0 launch. It's like, yeah, because I posted a couple times and then was like, okay, that was embarrassing. Never mind. It wasn't a failed thing, you know, like we just create our failures, but everyone has the potential. Like if you want it, you can create it. So something one of my coaches and I were talking about recently, like if you want it, you can have anything. Like you can create anything. There's so many people who've proven this, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
watch the Arnold docu series. You're like, holy shit, I guess you can be anything, you know, just will you assume everything that comes with it?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the
Mark
question.
Manson has talked about that somewhat recently. Like, we want the best sides of all of our dreams, but to have the dream that you want, to have the relationship that you want, to have the business that you want, are you willing to take all the things that come with it? The late nights, the kind of uncomfortable conversations, the recommitment, like that's all part of it, you know? And you have to be willing to take the quote unquote bad with the good. So, yeah, one thing I want to go back to that you said is this idea of flirting with people, flirting with your business, flirting with life. People like to be flirted with. So if you are taking that energy, that playfulness, that like love, that, you know, I don't even know how to describe it other than flirting into your containers, then I think you're actually going to attract more people than if you were pushing things down their throat.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, and this is why I love exploring polarity, this is like and learning about energetics. And okay, there really is in every relationship, whether or not we want to admit it, there are power dynamics at play. And when we think about feminine, masculine energetics, there is always one party who's doing the pushing things forward and the one who's leading the way and one who's following. You know, and there's always someone who's kind of trying to get you and someone who's the one getting got. You know, that's like how it goes. And so when you realize like, oh shit, like what if I can allow people to lead themselves to me? And I actually become like use lighthouse marketing and just like express myself. I love Mama Gina. She wrote Pussy Reclamation, which I love that book.
Such a
A lot
good
of
book.
people are like, what? You know, but
Very good book. We'll have it in the show notes.
yeah, she talks about flirtation as the art of really enjoying yourself in the company of others. And I just love that because that's all flirting is, you know, it's not to get something. It's just like, let me play with this. Let me not walk into the other room hounding my partner about why we haven't spent time together. And I'm not saying don't communicate, but the answer often in healing relationships is not communication. It's like understanding that often when you're over giving and trying to make it work and trying to give and give and give to this other person to make them feel something, that the opposite should be happening, which is you actually just pour back into yourself. It's like, oh, in that moment you could dress up in something that feels really sensual. You could pour a bubble bath. You could listen to some music. You could say something cheeky from the other room, unattached to whether that person comes and joins you. And that's flirtation. So that's really what it feels like enjoying yourself, feeling yourself, expressing yourself in the company of others. And it's something that is not necessarily a tactic, but it's an energy that's infused into everything that you do and that someone can feel. It feels flirtatious. It feels playful. It feels like there's an outcome and there's a detachment from the outcome, but there's also like an invitation and there's a seduction that's there. But yeah, I think I always tell my clients like flirt with each other in the chat box. And I never really realized I was doing that either. I'd be part of group programs and stuff. And I'd like message people privately, you know, like, hey. And so now I always tell people programs, like if you see someone, you know, that you haven't met before, or like you see someone, they're wearing something cute, or like you just like want to flirt with them, like send them a note. I encourage them to flirt with each other, to just like put out feelers, to connect for the sake of it, to really enjoy the process itself, you know, and that's really, again, the feminine is very process oriented rather than being so outcome obsessed.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I want to share with people who are listening, because I think it's easy for me to understand what you're sharing. We have a shared language, but for people who are listening and they're like, I want to feel like Shoshana feels, but I don't even actually understand. Can we give some like 3D real world specifics around like, okay, simple funnel. That means what? You posted an Instagram story, someone DM'd you, they got a payment link, they went to a Zoom meeting. Straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But as you've scaled, what are ways that you've kept it simple?
My gosh, it's so wild. It's in so many ways exactly the same. I actually made this reel recently that was like, the things that got me to my first six figures are the same things that got me to my like millions, because anyone who tells you otherwise is probably trying to sell you something, and like trying to make you feel like all I focused on was giving value, showing up, working on who I'm being, raising the bar. And as you raise the bar and as you go through things, like there's no script to calling in a high level client. You just go through the kinds of experiences that high level clients want to learn from. So you just got to grow. And I think a lot of people bypass that, like, actually the quality of the work itself and your art and how distinct it is through like using your voice and finding your voice and building something that's really standout. That's so important. The marketing and the sales strategy is like kind of secondary. And I think a lot of people also find a disconnect. I just had a program about this, like a disconnect between the art. They are focused on the art and the quality of it, and they know it's amazing, but then the business doesn't have an artistry in it. It's like I was walking on the Santa Barbara or Santa Monica pier with Christian, and I'm like someone who just like takes things from people. This guy hands me a CD and I'm like, thanks, and he's like, okay, that's gonna cost you, and Christian gives it back and he's like, this is like a tactic. When you give someone something, then they feel like they need to pay you. I'm like, what the fuck? That's so weird. And anyway, walking back, I'm like, I did not like that. We did not buy the CD. We're walking back and there's this like this rap group that's on the corner, and they're rapping and everyone's having fun and people are like dancing and they're selling CDs.
Yeah.
And it's like they're marketing and they're selling, but they're doing it in a way that translates.
Yeah.
There's not this like, here's my art and then here's this weird business tactic. It's like, it makes sense. Like their love for the art is like driving the commerce of it. They're like, oh, we're going to do this in a really artistic way. Like I'm going to make like, I love Christian said recently, like reading my sales page is like transformational. He said that about his own product. I loved it.
I get that. I get that. Yeah. I feel that way reading my own book. I'm like, wow, man, I like really need to hear that. And I feel like a writer right now. Yeah.
Right. Like I have some clients who are like big influencers, and I think it's really interesting because people think, oh, it's so easy for them. They have a big email list. They have, so many people following them. They have way more likes and people than me. But what they do is they share the lifestyle stuff. They share their heart. And then they're like, by the way, I'm selling something, and it's like the energy totally shifts and it doesn't even sound like them in the emails. So honestly, like this is why sometimes it's hard for people to wrap their head around, because it's like when you're learning how to snowboard and you're like, I swear, or learning anything, and you're like, I swear it's the gear. Like these boots are really uncomfortable. And you're like, no, I'm not getting something. And you're like, no, you just like have to just like keep snowboarding. That's it. And you're like, I think it's the gear. Okay, yeah, let me go try another pair of shoes. And the whole day is gone. And it's like someone's out there just going run after run after run after run and having fun and crying sometimes and feeling like, oh my God, should I quit? And then saying, no, I'm going to teach myself grit. And then they're getting back up. And then at the end of the day, they've taken 100 runs and you're still trying to fit on the shoes, like a different email sequence or something. Yeah. And so I think it's like, it's not the gear, it's ours, it's us. And so ultimately, like so many of my super successful clients, I've said like every single time in business that like hasn't been working, I've thought that it's been like algorithm or strategy. And it's like always in hindsight, you're like, oh, it was me.
It was the energy.
Like when I feel the most magnetic, like when I'm really in tune with my life, even if it's like one of my clients like going through her biggest heartbreak and like publicly, and like it was like, whoa, things were really popping off. It's like, yeah, because there was an aliveness, there was a charge, and people were following the journey. And so I would say that currently, like how I've scaled up, I started with one-to-one coaching. And then from there, I was like, oh my gosh, I love, and I wouldn't say like it has to be one way, like one-to-one and then group and then this. But for me, that made the most sense. And it really did help me build confidence. Like, I don't think I would have felt comfortable leading a group if I hadn't had so many one-to-one clients and heard similar things and gotten comfortable with content. And I launched my first group. And I remember feeling like, oh my God, I needed another month, like all the emails, like it feels like so much. And what I find is a lot of people feel like when they're going through a growth spurt, they're trying something new, like this can't actually be humanly possible. Like I've got to hire all these people, I've got to set up all these systems. And it's so crazy, but it's actually like when you focus on the energetics and the emotions of it, you realize that like if you can be the chill rocket ship and if you can just practice, some things become second nature, some things become easy. In 24 hours, all of a sudden feels like, holy shit, like Elon Musk has 24 hours in a day. Presidents of countries have 24 hours in a day. I just need to grow as a person. Like I just get to grow as a person. It's not that I need all these things. It's just I get to expand my capacity. So I launched my group and I think I had like 27 people in my first group program. It was a ton of fun. I loved community building and I just like delivered and I made it a price point that felt like, gosh, this feels like a price point that I can lift over time. And that's honestly been something I'd tell people, like, you don't have to start and have like this highest ticket offer that you can't even get behind. Like I remember I was charging $800 a month for one-to-one coaching. And I remember my coach saying, those are your baby prices. And I was like, well, okay, my heart almost fell out of my butt when someone paid me like $5,000. I don't know what you're talking about because that was insane. And I feel like my heart was beating 300 miles per hour. And I'm like living at my parents' house in Connecticut, just like, they have no idea what's going on. I don't even know how to tell people what just happened. I'm like walking down the street like, oh my God, what the fuck just happened? And this is funny. That client actually is like still one of my clients, 4 years later. She's just like, we've gone through so many things together. And she's not necessarily like a woman in, like she has her own massage therapy company and stuff, but she's not necessarily like, okay, I want to have my multiple sum figure a year, but she's still here through all the evolutions. But that's when the group started. And then that's when I was like, okay, this is a group, but what about like mentoring? So not like program delivery, but almost like coaching, but in a group of people who are kind of like past the beginning stages. And granted, I wasn't super past the beginning stages. So my first like masterminds were still earlier stage, but they weren't like, here's the basics of how to build an offer. Here's the basics of how to alchemize your shame, how to get out of victimhood. It was like, okay, you're growing, you're learning, you want to be in a community of other people who really have skin in the game. And I would lead the masterminds. And at first they were kind of a blend between like program, teaching and coaching because people kind of still needed hands-on. And I went through a lot of wobbles and a lot of like quantum combustions, and a lot of like really difficult situations that were hard. And that really taught me a lot of things about leadership and human dynamics. And I got my own, I have had so much coaching. I've worked with so many people. I've really invested more than I ever thought I would ever invest in myself and ever invest in coaching. Like, I think my head would have blown up if you told me this like 4 years ago. Of course, like, yes, what I've made, my lifestyle and everything, but also like, wait, I invested what? In like a house? Like, holy shit. But like, that's been really helpful. But from the masterminds, I started playing more and more with like, what was alive for me? When I start making my first hundreds of thousands of dollars, I was like, this doesn't feel how I thought. And in fact, like old scarcity stuff is coming up. And I was looking at money through the lens of like attachment style. And I was looking at like, I was just really interested in money and how I was able to attract it and how we're able to hold it. And I was realizing like, oh, my background is a like finance blogger and investing in the markets, like well before I was a coach, even if that was like playing on Schwab and like having Wealthfront, like I kind of was a nerd about it. Like, oh, I actually have a level of financial literacy that people don't have. So I was like, what about a wealth program? And so I was like, cool, maybe I'll do like a more specific program. I did this wealth program. And then, okay, oh, I learned like a lot of people like, how do you tell such great stories? And then I was like your storytelling is so great. I love reading your stories. I want to learn how to do storytelling like that. And I knew I wanted to run my accelerator again. I was like, it would be a cool like pre-party. It's like a storytelling course, but it's like a weekend retreat. Like it's like 2 long days and it's just like the art of storytelling. Cool, storytelling mastery. And then I launched another program and I invited people into the next thing. And then from there, it was just like, oh my gosh, I went through my life's greatest heartbreak, and I'm like, my life is everything that I thought my life was. It's not my life besides living brave, which was like, thank God for this thing that like reminds me of who I am. Because I know that even in the hardest moments, like my coaching calls made me feel better. Like it made me feel like, yes, like I'm going to go through this. Yes, it's painful, but I'm going to go through this like I want to tell the story in hindsight. Like I'm going to go through this because I know I'm going to teach through it. I don't need to teach heartbreak right now, but like,
Yeah.
God damn it, this is so on brand. When I went through that and I learned, I invested in the coaches and I did the feminine energy work and I learned about, the inner game on a much deeper level. And I was healing on a really deep level. And I was learning things about life and myself that I wanted to share with people. And it brought me back to the beginning, of one-to-one coaching. I was like, now I want to do a Becoming Brave program that has nothing to do with business and nothing to do with leadership, nothing to do with sales, but it has to do with bravery and confidence. And that felt like a huge thing. And let me do some boudoir photos and let me change my brand. And so the whole journey, basically what I'm sharing, has been like growth by way of evolution. So it's like, what am I currently expanded into? And what have I done before that I want to bring back, but in a way that still feels alive? Like there are some programs I run 7, 8 times. And a way that I've scaled up now is I'll still run programs as they feel alive, and I'll still, gather people and invite them into things like on social media, on a live stream, on a class, on a challenge. But recently, instead of kind of having the old model that I had, which was like program, and then high level mastermind, I brought in something called the Vortex, which is like a year-long all access pass, which was really like bringing continuity into my business, just like my masterminds were, and like high ticket one-to-one masterminds. It's like, for people who aren't ready for like super high level, but really people were joining program after program after program. How do I just say thank you, also bring some consistency for me, and start to build that consistency for them? I started a Vortex. This was late 2021. And it wasn't until like into 2022 that I started to say, like, bring in some live, like hot seat in a private community and really make the Vortex like a place. But now I'd say my business model is less of program, and more just different tiers of access. Yeah. So it's like the club is a place where people come, and it's a place. Like the first tagline was not another course. Like it's not another course. It's a living, breathing current where you're always going to be meeting new people, that there's always people to mastermind with, collaborate with, connect with, that it's just like a hub, a home, a network.
And these are continuity programs, but at different tiers and getting different proximity to you.
Yes. So
got it.
Explaining now, like the club is my membership that you were talking about before. And that's where I'll do my like daily behind the scenes trainings on different themes of the month, which has been like so freaking fun.
Yeah.
And then I have the Vortex, which is like a coaching space and has access to all of my programs. And then I have masterminds and retreats and things like that. So I've definitely simplified more. But again, like I always try to stray away from like, this is the way. And I know that there's like, this is the way continuity model. You can only sell things that drive into continuity. And it's like, well, fuck, I want to launch an offer, and I could like wrap it in some level of thing, but if it's feeling too heady, I'm just like, you know what? I'm really going to launch this and have fun and see who comes in. And so it's been fun to play with some more structure and some more. I got really heady with scaling strategies. And then I was like, I'm bored of this. Now I want to like talk about energetics and magnetism. And so we go through seasons, and I would say like there's no right or wrong way. It's always the energy behind it. And so for me in March, I was super stoked about like different continuity tiers, and it felt really fun to work on more of those structures and the bones of the business. And then when it didn't feel fun anymore, and I was like, I think I just want to like play. One of my good friends in a mastermind with me was like, because I was sharing like, this almost dissonance between like the art of it and then like this is what I should do to grow it in a way that makes sense. And it's like, I know that like she said, like, you get to a certain level and you're like, I know that I could be just building my level 2, but like, fuck it, I want to do a class about happiness. So like we get to allow ourselves to do things that like are just for the sake of them. And often that drives growth in the business that we could have never expected through just using the logical formulas and tactics and tried and true strategies.
Well, because it comes back to the intention, right? And the frequency behind the intention. Creating for the sake of creating versus pushing.
Yeah.
So Shoshana, before we wrap, I would love to hear what is one final piece of wisdom or encouragement that you would offer to new coaches or coaches that are looking to scale, but they might be hitting some sort of plateau.
My words of wisdom, just honestly, keep experimenting, like keep growing, keep having fun, like find something, if it's not yet profitable, find something that takes the pressure off of your artistry and just connect with people, like explore, express yourself and have fun. Don't forget to have fun.
I love that. Where can people find more of you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Shoshanna_Raven. That's a great place to connect. And I also have a podcast called Living Brave.
Yay! We will be sure to have both of those in the show notes. Shoshana, such a treat. I feel very grateful for all your wisdom, your storytelling, and your enthusiasm. And I'm sure that all the listeners do as well. So sending you lots of love. Grateful for you.
So grateful. Thank you so much.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you loved today's episode, do us a favor, go ahead and drop us a review on whatever podcast platform you are currently listening to. If you didn't know, we are giving out a free Transformation Academy coaching certification to the first 100 reviewers. All you have to do is send us an email at contact@transformationacademy.com, include a photo of your review, and we'll do our best to verify your identity and get you set up with a free certification. If you also want some additional support, then head over to theprofitablecoach.com/freebie, where you will get access to a free training on how to magnetize your ideal clients. If you want more information about Shoshana and all the cool things that we talked about on today's show, then head to theprofitablecoach.com/008. Thank you so much, you guys. I'm sending you tons of love, and I will catch you next week.